Further updates on the situation in the Middle East. Brent crude crossed above $100 a barrel last night for the first time since 2022. Brent oil futures went as high as $119 per barrel at one point, but now the price has done a full reversal and is actually down 5% as I'm recording this. The Japanese stock market was down 7%. S&P futures were down almost 2% heading into the morning, and now have made a full recovery into the green at the end of the trading day. What on earth is going on here? Well, let's start with why the price of oil spiked last night. First off, we had the Israeli Air Force hitting 30 Iranian fuel depots in and around Tehran. 30. This was the first time since the war began that oil infrastructure was directly targeted inside Iran. Although they had been personally going after oil and gas assets in other countries already, as I mentioned in my last video. And get this, according to Axios, Israel just went and bombed it, even after the United States officials thought it was a bad idea. The Americans were given advance notice, and their message to Israel was literally WTF. And I have to agree with their reaction. There's a good chance that if you're on Twitter, you've seen the videos of the oil on fire in the streets of Tehran, which is going to have toxic effects on the city, creating acid rain risk, and other issues with long-term exposure to the gases released from burning oil like that. And this actually highlights a larger issue. Even if the Strait of Hormuz is deemed safe relatively soon and Iran is totally incapacitated, then we still find ourselves in a situation where many of the oil and gas assets in the region have been damaged or taken offline. Iraq, the UAE, and Kuwait, three of OPEC's largest oil producers, have started cutting production because there's nowhere to send the oil. It's all typically transported through the strait, which tankers refuse to travel through. Even if they can get insured against potential damages, they don't want to risk getting attacked by Iran. The longer this goes on, the more assets might get damaged or shut down since there's nowhere for the oil to go. It might take weeks, if not longer, to get these oil assets producing again. And we're potentially delving into some dangerous territory here with not just oil assets being targeted, but desalination plants being struck as well. There are about 400 desalination plants in the Persian Gulf. Approximately 50 of those produce 90% of the portable drinking water for various Gulf countries. Kuwait gets 90% of its drinking water from desalination, Saudi Arabia 70%, and the UAE around 40%, just to list a few examples. In some of these countries, there's essentially no drinkable water without converting seawater, and we've reached a point in this conflict where countries are starting to potentially target these plants. Iran's foreign minister has accused the U.S. of striking a freshwater desalination plant on Keshem Island, and that's in the Strait of Hormuz, and he said water supply to 30 villages was cut off. Now, the U.S. denied it, so we don't know what's ultimately going on there, but Iran used that as a pretext to target a desalination plant in Bahrain, which was attacked by a drone over the weekend. This was a major escalation and threatens a humanitarian crisis if this escalates. It's another data point indicating that we're not close to seeing any ceasefire here, and the markets were especially reacting negatively to who Iran just elected as their next supreme leader. Iran's Assembly of Experts officially named Mujtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader. He is the son of the Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, who was just killed, and he's known to be more of a hardliner and a radical than his father. Not a good sign for potential peace in the region, which is why the oil price was skyrocketing, along with all the assets getting damaged in the region. Iran's foreign minister also flatly rejected any ceasefire so far, and all of this somehow just magically got reversed today, mostly because of the comments Trump made. Namely, he said that the war is, quote, very complete, pretty much, to CBS News. So we had oil spike to nearly $120 and then crash back to $83 just off of this, and meanwhile, many of the oil assets in the region are still damaged or shut down and would take time to restart. And that assumes Iran even stops attacking oil tankers in the region and allows everyone to pass safely through the Strait of Hormuz, which seems unlikely. A senior IRGC commander in Iran, Ibrahim Jabari, just made public comments that they're prepared to fight the United States for a decade, which I would assume and hope would not happen, but that tells you how Iran is probably feeling about Trump's comments. Now, he's acting like Iran is just going to accept that this is over, and I would highly doubt that. And he's clearly trying to manipulate the stock markets and oil prices. Beyond his comments, we've also seen that the G7 countries, the United States, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, the UK, and Canada, are talking about potentially releasing oil from their strategic reserves to dampen oil price spikes. As I'm recording this, in total, the G7 countries have nearly 1.2 billion barrels of oil in their reserves, with an additional 600 million in industry-held reserves through companies that would collaborate with the governments if necessary. This release would be around 400 million barrels, which would negate the loss of the 20 million barrels per day transported through the strait, as long as this conflict only lasts a few weeks. The larger issue is that while Trump can claim victory, the reality is that many of the oil and gas assets in the region are offline for one reason or another, so things are not going to magically improve like the markets are acting like they are, even if the strait becomes safe for passage. While Iran's military capabilities have been diminished dramatically, the conflict might be far from over. I just saw a clip on Twitter of Trump being asked about how he said the war was pretty much complete, and meanwhile the defense secretary said it's just starting. So he was asked about that contradiction, and Trump said, and I quote, "You could say both." So, this is standard Trump. But he did ultimately say that the war is going to continue. So we are in that usual scenario where Trump is running the mixed messaging playbook. And Trump clearly does not want oil prices to spike like they did, but making comments to the press will only impact markets for so long. And reality is going to set in. If the strategic reserves of the G7 nations are flooded into the market, and Russia potentially sees its sanctions removed to allow that oil to be sold throughout the world, then prices could stabilize at reasonable levels. They can artificially lower prices for a decent amount of time, but if this war drags on for months or longer, then the global economy is going to be in shambles. Let's be honest. So now we're just going to have to watch and see what happens over the coming days.